welcome everyone. Looks like most people had lunch. Thanks for settling in. So Patrice, the topic is the sandwich generation. I'm sure half of the people are in here because just the title itself, they're like, what the heck is a sandwich generation? You want to give some context to what we're going to talk about?
Really good to be here. Welcome, everyone. I'm Patrice Bening. I'm one of the wealth advisors here at Morton. And just to reiterate, my husband thought that I was going to talk about the generation that eats most sandwiches. And that's not it. So sandwich generation, hello, we are it. I would say Americans in their 40s and 50s make up the greatest part of the sandwich generation. Actually, a very interesting statistic is that 54%, so more than half in this particular group, currently have a parent that they care for that's 65 years or older, also take care of a young child 18 years or younger, or help financially an adult child. So there's a lot of complexities to the sandwich generation, and understanding how we feel while we're in that particular spot is really the topic today. Personally, I have experienced being in the sandwich generation, and I'll share a little story. About 6 years ago, when my boys were about 9 and 11 years old, we had learned that my mother-in-law was diagnosed with ALS. For those of you who don't know much about ALS, it's a disease that truly blindsides you. You have it for a while, and you actually don't know you have it, and then you're given a diagnosis, more of a death sentence. So we were forced to make some decisions more from a reactive standpoint. And when I say that is going to give you a backstory, she was not feeling well. We had noticed something going on for about 6 months. She was driving. She was living on her own. She lived up in Northern California, so she was not close to us. And when she came to visit, we just noticed certain things. She did a bunch of tests. It was not a stroke. Her heart was fine. Her speech was a little, slowed down, and her gait when she was walking was also a little off. But other than that, she was fine. So we brought her down. We had her see a neurologist at Cedars-Sinai, and after 3 days of tests, the ALS diagnosis was confirmed. And the next thing was said, she could not drive anymore. And she could not live on her own anymore. So she came down for 2 weeks to be with us to do this, and she stayed. So it became this fire drill of a decision-making process, and the reason I say fire drill is because we had not had that discussion in our family, in my husband's family, to see what do you do when your mom and your dad is healthy? What do you do when they're not? How are you going to handle that particular process? So for me personally, that was very eye-opening, and kind of really, really happy to wanted to talk about this with you. But where do you fall in this, Jeff?
First, thank you for sharing that story. In rehearsal, you didn't share that with me, so that was really something. My personal situation, so I have 3 kids, happily married 3 kids, one in elementary school, one in middle school, one who just entered high school, which is kind of mind-blowing. 2 parents who just turned 80 this year. They're in the crowd somewhere, maybe, living happy, vibrant lives. My in-laws are both in their early to mid-70s. They live in Orange County now, but over the years, off and on, they've actually lived in our home at times, which was nice in a lot of ways, but also created some interesting dynamics, without a doubt. So the punchline of this session is, and a lot of you are in the same boat as us, is we're very busy. We're navigating a lot of things. We have a lot of responsibilities. But I'll start with the kids and focus on them first. We are professional Uber drivers.
Yes,
right?
we are.
I mean, it's just, we are taking them everywhere, to and from, sports galore, schools, you name it. And that's more the typical situation. Less typical, but still common, are families who maybe have split marriages, mixed families, potentially children with health or developmental challenges or roadblocks. A lot of responsibilities, a lot of moving parts that we're facing. So with that being said, are we facing something different than previous generations? Or no? I mean, is this something that every generation has dealt with before? Or again, is something actually different in terms of not better or worse, but different in terms of the stresses and responsibilities that we face?
I don't believe that this is new to us. I think what's changed is the landscape of the modern family. We are truly in the modern family, as in where women in particular have joined the workforce, and wonderfully so, but not just joined the workforce. We are stepping in as more than, staying home initially and then going back to work when the kids are in high school. It's more that we go in off the bat, or we have careers, we become the breadwinners in our families. So when you think about that role assignment, that's really what I think has changed, because having two parents working puts a lot of pressure on a family. And, going back to my story, at the time I wasn't working at Warren, I commuted 2+ hours every day to a job that had very inflexible hours. My husband drove to the Central Coast twice a week. Our kids were in 2 different school districts, plus add-on sports, plus add-on homework. So I am very grateful, thinking back, that I had an incredible village, and I relied a lot on my friends to help me with pickups and all that. But it really definitely put a lot of stress in our family.
You hit on a theme, 2-income households, obviously much more of a theme of our generation than in previous generations. You mentioned how the role of the female in the relationship has changed, mainly in wonderful ways. Similar for men, as both roles have moved more towards the center to some degree, which is generally a wonderful thing. Lots of men now are stay-at-home parents. Maybe they work part-time and they help with school drop-offs and pickups. But the flip side is now we are wearing a lot more hats, I think, than previous generations. The old cliche of, the man of the family making a living and then coming home and putting his feet up and having the beer handed to him, that kind of is not a thing anymore.
No.
We are helping with
No.
Yeah, if my wife were here, she'd be like, huh? We have a lot of responsibilities. We're helping with homework. We're helping with drop-offs. It's a lot.
Well, even more particular, you're the CEO of Morton Wealth, so I would say that maybe you would get some slack because you have all this responsibility.
She gives me a lot of slack.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's really, I think when I think back is even today, you would think that my husband and I have this role thing down. We both work, but I'll tell you that tonight he's probably going to call me and say, "Who's got dinner?"
Happened to me last night.
Yeah, so I still don't understand how we don't know who's got dinner covered at this point, but apparently we still struggle with that. So it is a real thing, but I would say when it comes to the topics that we talk today, having clarity, it starts with our spouse, it starts with our partner, and being able to be very transparent and understand where our strengths lie. So, if I'm really good with the homework and he's really good with the sports, let's divide and conquer, because otherwise there'll be resentment and we're going to start keeping score, and that's not going to lead to anything good.
Yeah, communication and clarity, to your point, is key. Another thing that I would say has changed in our generation are some cultural norms. So now moving on in terms of more helping and taking care of parents as they age, things have drastically changed in our generation. So what I mean by that is in the previous generation, my parents, especially my grandparents' generation, it was just an absolute expectation that you were going to take care of your parents, no questions asked. My father, for instance, he shared a bedroom with his grandfather for much of his childhood. Now, with families all over the place, different cities, there's much less of that. But what's changed, I think, obviously, as people age, they want to be more independent. I actually think most of the reason for that is not because of us, but I think as many people, and my parents are a great example of this, as they enter retirement and are in retirement, they are fiercely independent. They want to be independent. They want to live fulfilled, fruitful lives. And as a part of that, and we hear this a lot from a lot of our clients, they do not want to be a burden on their kids. So with that context, you have an interesting history, background. You were born in Romania. You spent your childhood through even some of your early adult years there. Can you compare and contrast more of the traditional values in Romania as compared to more modern values in America?
Absolutely. I would say the family unit is the single most important thing in my culture, and I think I've spent my entire life really surrounded by a village of families. So I only have 2 first cousins, but I have 27,000 second cousins and something else like that. And I think we all centered around food.
I don't talk to my cousins.
Yeah.
Cousins aren't a thing with a lot of our generation.
But even when I, there was, I was personally, my parents actually, even for the time, even my mom, it was a patriarchal society where women typically stay home, but my mom worked, and my grandmother, I walked home from school and I just went to my grandma's place. We always gathered around food. That was definitely the common denominator when it came to all of our family dynamics. And but I think going forward is that it was always expected to, you just take care of your family, you take care of your elders, and it was together. It was not that necessarily it was my job or, the cousin's job or my sibling's job, is that we was as an implied duty and responsibility. And I think that came from me innate when my mother-in-law got sick, and that's where my husband and I kind of butted heads, because for me, it was without question she was going to live with us. And for him, he said, no, I don't think that's going to be an option.
That's really interesting. And
how
this
are we
was
gonna
his
do that?
mother. It's just your background and your history, yeah.
So it's I won temporarily, but for me, I'm also a gal that sees the glass half full. So what we did by having my mother-in-law be with us and be able to take care of her for a little bit is that our kids got to experience and kind of create that bond that goes multi-generational and intergenerational, I should say, and see the level of care that we provide to our family and be able to respect that and take that themselves further on. But kind of thinking back of like our kids and going back to culture and American culture, I think kids nowadays, and we know this because we're in it to win it right now, Jeff. So, how are kids doing nowadays?
I like that, in it to win it. The dynamic with raising children in this environment, to be honest, I think I'm a little bit frustrated by it. The competitive pressures that they're facing are more extreme than when we were growing up. I mean, just even going back to the simple things of sports. Every kid has to be in a sport now, and of course it has to be a club team. And now as a result, we're driving all over the place, during the weekends. But then schooling is just much more competitive. I'm sure all of you in the audience are aware of this. It's a shame. Most kids just do not get into their school of choice anymore. That was not the case when we were growing up. I mean, you had your pick and you would get into your top choice or two. It's just incredibly competitive. So kids are taking more honors classes, more AP classes, and then all the extracurricular activities. I mean, they're really now building a resume in college to build their own personal story. So it seems like the default answer, and we feel pressure, right? It's a competitive race, and we want to set up our kids for success. And the answer just seems to be more, right? More sports, more AP classes, more extracurricular activities. Can you give some context around how you approach this?
Well, in my opinion, more is not the answer. And I think that's really where, we probably just kind of throw our hands up in the air because we give up, because we have to do what everybody else is doing. And if we don't, then our kids are going to be lacking. So I think, in my opinion, and something that I've tried to do personally is kids nowadays, and if, I read a statistic that said 83% of high schoolers right now are stressed about school. Yeah. So that's not even everything else that they have to do. So, and I think the most important thing we can do is support our kids by making sure they know they belong, that they matter, because a lot of the mental health issues that even have come post-COVID is the fact that they have so much to do, so much on their plate, that if we don't really value them for their intrinsic core, being who they are, that's not attached to any results. So that one comes even when your child walks into a room, put your phone down, light up when you see your kid, because that's going to matter so much for them.
What about when they just completely ignore you when they do that?
Very true. Good point, Jeff. So maybe that's when you assign them a chore, because supposedly...
Tough love.
Yes. They say they value chores because they feel seen. So... but no, the whole point to this is that figuring out the balance, and I think what we want to drive, and I think of all the sessions we're trying to say here, is that being able to find a resource and know who to talk to. So there's so many things that, especially on the college planning side, I'm definitely going through it right now. I have a senior, so there's ways you can utilize even financial resources, from having a 529 account, or if your child had a summer job and you open a Roth IRA, and then also take away the emotional battle of having to help your child through that process. So I hired a college counselor because I value my relationship with my son. So I think having resources and knowing who to call is very important.
Related to that, and you've shared some stories with me, and you've been very thoughtful of this, of just, in all honesty, checking the ego at the door and asking for help, leaning on friends, leaning on family, communicating with your spouse. Our friends are such tremendous resources because, we have some friends who have kids who are a little bit older than us, and so they've been through it. So we ask them a lot of questions in terms of learning lessons. And again, also back on Morton Wealth, tremendous resources in Morton Wealth. If you have questions around college funding, 529 plans, you mentioned like the Roth IRA as an example, which was in a session here that Bo with Stacy was talking about, if only he contributed to a Roth early in age. We have tremendous resources, and Patrice in particular is a wonderful resource on this front.
Thank you. So kind of really shifting back to our parents, because we are really the sandwich generation. What do you see right now as far as a really big challenge with taking care of our parents?
Similar to how I think things are more complicated with our children, I think things are more complicated for parents, anyone in their retirement years. And it's a double-edged sword. It's mainly because of the choices that are out there. And there's a tremendous amount of wonderful choices. So what I mean by that is in previous generations, again, where you lived, you're going to live at your home, maybe live with your kid, and limited choices in the way of retirement communities. Now, retirement communities galore of all shapes and sizes targeted to different income levels. You have continuing care communities where in one location on one campus, you start at independent living and you can move on to some sort of assisted living over time and then have nursing facilities along the way as well. Wonderful choices, but overwhelming because there's a lot of choices out there and just the research on this stuff is complicated. So that's just the living side of the equation. Talk about medical insurance. Even when I get a medical insurance bill, I avoid it, right? Hopefully my wife will take a look at it. Just navigating through that is just mind-numbing. Medicare, Social Security, such complexity. Can you give a little bit of color on thoughts around how people facing those situations should navigate some of those things?
Absolutely, and I just want to, this only because I've seen this in the news recently, the thing on health insurance. Probably you've seen now there's a Mary Lou Retton. She's an Olympian gymnast. She's in the hospital. She's 55 years old. She looks like she's dying, and she does not have health insurance. And this is somebody that has means, has probably surrounded herself with very, very smart people in her life. But how do you get to this point and not have health insurance? Yeah. She has 4 daughters, and again, drawing back to our point, having those conversations in your family is so important on all the topics you mentioned. But I would say, even let's say going back to skilled nursing, my mother-in-law never figured out if she wanted to be taken care of at home, aging in place, or would she want to go to a skilled nursing facility. And as I toured, as I potentially contemplated putting her in a home, I realized that a home was not a place for her. It was not who she was. She didn't care for bingo or jazz or puzzles. I do, by the way. I told my kids they definitely have to put me in a place with bingo, jazz, and puzzles. But I would say is knowing that what's important to you, what do you value in that particular area, because that's going to take pressure off the family as well. Navigating Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, those are, even for us, we are very, very grateful to have incredible resources, and a lot of them are here in the room. Even downsizing, like working with the realtor and being able to know, what are the tax implications of doing that? And, it's really important to know who you can call. And I think first and foremost, that's the most overwhelming thing, is because you end up doing nothing because you don't know where to go. So I would say, and then further, estate planning. So documents related to your financial as well as medical well-being, because you might think that your child will be the one, if you do not want to have that DNR, your child may not be able to do that for you. So who do you designate? So really have those discussions early on and related to healthcare directives, to powers of attorney, and make sure the trusts are being reviewed. If it's been 5 years, make sure they're still aligned with your values and your wishes. And again, resources. You can come to us, and we can show you in the right direction.
You hit on so many topics, and that unto itself just shows the complications, all the moving parts that we're faced with. Please, all of you in the room, all of our clients, consider us a resource. Don't just think of us as your investment manager, diversifying a portfolio, and then helping with a cash flow plan into retirement. We're so much more than that. And we will likely have the answer, but then if we don't have the answer on some specific need, we are so connected with other resources in the community where we can get you an answer. All right, thank you, everyone.
Wow.